All right, so let's go ahead and get this party started. Thank you so much that you have chosen to join us for this webinar. We're extremely excited to have you and tell you all about becoming a CPA. And so I just want to start out with some introductions and also just some generalized instruction about how we're going to do this. So we're going to start out by having the presentation, and then we have time for Q&A at the end. We do ask that you use the chat feature. We do have Simone, who you can see on the screen now, who is going to be monitoring that chat to make sure those questions get to myself and Blaine Peterson, who has joined us from the society. So just for introduction point, I want to start with, I'm Ashley Plushko. I am a CPA and I'm the executive director of the Oklahoma Accountancy Board. And then Simone, if you want to introduce yourself.
Morning, everyone. I'm Simone. I'm the examination coordinator here at the Oklahoma Accountancy Board.
Yes, and then Blaine, if you want to introduce yourself real fast.
Sure, I'm Blaine Peterson. I'm the CEO and president of the Oklahoma Society of CPAs. Glad to be here today.
Yes, so yes, it's going to be a lot of fun. All right, so Blaine is actually going to kick us off, because before we get into the nitty-gritty of all of the the fun government regulation stuff, he's going to tell you about why it is so great to be a CPA and all the opportunities there is. So I'm going to actually start by passing it off to him, and he's going to speak to you for 10 to 15 minutes. All right, Blaine, it's all yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Ashley, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. Excited, sun shining here on a Friday, which is always a great thing. I'm going to share my screen just for a moment. Hopefully this works out just fine. Hopefully you can see that. Yeah, there we go. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background before Ashley goes into all the in-depth components of the CPA and what her office does. I'm the CEO for the Oklahoma Society of CPAs. So I am a CPA. I'm about 1 month away from 30 years as a CPA. So I've done this my entire career, even though it's led me to a lot of avenues that I never thought existed within my career. And so you might be wondering, if you're not already familiar, what do we do before you learn about what the state board does? So we're the group, the Oklahoma Society of CPAs, that our goal is to support you through your journey to become a CPA. Through your education journey to get licensed by passing the exam and getting your experience, as well as once you become a CPA, we're your partner for the rest of your career. So we provide a myriad of benefits to support you during those various phases of your career. You can see our mission here. So if I was going to summarize this, we kind of narrow that down to a few areas. With advocacy, we protect and promote the CPA credential. We're very passionate about that. We'll talk briefly here in a moment about all the benefits that come with that and others. Education. So you will maintain your skills and continue to grow throughout your career. And so we provide what I think is the top ongoing education, continuing education throughout your career, to not only keep your skills where they need to be, but to develop new skills in new marketplaces. And then finally, member engagement. That's probably about as important as anything that we do. I always tell students, those that are in the process of becoming a CPA, and then new CPAs, build your network with people, build it with your peers, other CPAs, other students, accounting students, non-CPAs, but other professionals. You may not realize early in your career how valuable that network is going to be, but the sooner that you can grow that and develop it, it's really going to serve you wonderfully throughout your career. Real quickly, before I get into it, there's a QR code here for membership. I encourage everyone to visit our website with the QR code. Emerson Collins leads this team for us. She may be on the call here, but if you're a student, please take advantage of that student membership. We have a ton of resources that our team here at the OSCPA does to support you. And there's a list of a few resources right there. We want to help you build your career get a job, grow within your profession. Scholarships. Right now our scholarships are open for another week or two. We give out over $50,000 a year to accounting students. So if you fit that mold, please, you still have time to apply for that. Free mock exams. I'll get a lot of questions about, how do I prepare for the exam? We'll talk about that with exam prep courses, etc. But one of the things we do provide that Emerson and her team do is provide a free mock exam for the CPA, so you can get a feel for what that's like. That actually it will be coming up, I think, towards the end of April. So jump on that, take advantage of that. We really want to help you grow and get to your journey to becoming a CPA. Obviously, mix and mingles and meetups. We always look for ways to put you with your peer group or others that are like-minded, help grow your network. Regardless of what you end up doing 10, 20 years from now, this is going to serve you. And so real quickly, before we get back to Ashley, I always like to talk a little bit about what is an accountant, what is a CPA, what is the value? Well, really the accountant is the backbone of the business world. If you listen to Warren Buffett, right? The wizard of Omaha investor, he says, accounting is the language of business. And really what that leads to is money. Accountants are the ones that make sure all the money, whether it's cash, whether it's inventory, whatever, anything involved in the financial process, that is the role of the accountants to manage that for every business. So as you would expect, every business requires the CPA services, accounting services, whether it be a solo activity or a Fortune 500 company. There's accounting services at every step of that function. Real quickly, what's the difference between an accountant versus a CPA? You could do both. Obviously, all CPAs are accountants, but not all accountants are CPAs. CPAs have what we like to call the 3 E's. You've got your education, right? You've got your requisite experience to become certified as a CPA, and you've passed a very rigorous exam, right? You're probably very familiar with that. Emerson and her team have great relationships with the CPA exam review courses. You've probably heard of Becker and Gleim and Surgent and UWorld and some of those. We have relationships with them. They offer discounts with those. We even have some scholarships. They have study guides. They have a lot of ways to gamify it so it doesn't necessarily feel like you're studying. It's actually kind of fun sometimes. So that is a big accomplishment. When you're out in the workforce, CPAs are considered the trusted advisor of the business community. We don't just do taxes. We don't just do audit, financial records, etc. We really are an advisor for all things business related. And you can kind of see the surveys that comes out every year kind of indicates just how close we are held within the business community. As far as benefits, these are pretty easy to talk about. Becoming a CPA, you are at a heightened level of that education, of that experience, and of that training. As a result, number one, I like to tell people, you get your CPA, you never have to worry about finding a job again, okay? We practically don't have unemployment in the CPA world because we are so in demand. And regardless of what's happening with technology, whether it's AI, whether it's big computing, it doesn't matter. Accounting services just continue to grow and grow. I've been in this for 30 years. I started before we even used desktop computers, much less digitized, and our demand just continues to grow every year, which as a result, in my opinion, and I think everyone shares this, there has never been a better time to be a CPA. The reason for that is the majority of CPAs in Oklahoma, as well as the country, are reaching retirement age. So there is this huge issue here with not having enough CPAs to fill that gap. So job security, starting salaries are spiking. The top firms nationally, they're in the 90,000 to 100,000 starting range for CPAs. I mean, that's literally where we are right now. Other firms are coming that way as well. So if that's something that you value, that's really important. But I also want to emphasize, where you can go with that CPA. I started off doing audit and tax. I moved into the practice of law. I moved into management. Now I'm running an association. That background really enables you. It opens a lot of doors for you to move into once you get that CPA. You see things like flexibility, owning a business. We adapt to technology really well in the CPA world. So we do have a lot of our members that work all over the country, remotely on a full-time basis, part-time basis. A lot of our members live right here in Oklahoma City, but all their clients are West Coast and East Coast. You have that level of flexibility. So it really provides that freedom to really choose your own career path, however you want to do that. So that's a whole lot in a short amount of time, and I want to save as much time as we can for questions at the end here. But you'll get this information later. But that's my contact information as well as Emerson Collins, and we are always available to help you and answer any questions that you might have regarding the CPA credential and your journey. And I'll turn it back to you, Ashley. I appreciate that.
All right, thank you, Blaine. That's such great information about all the resources. And honestly, I didn't know about them when I was studying to become a CPA, and I really wish I had it, honestly. So that's very nice. So, all right, so now you've heard about some of the resources that you will have to help you throughout this journey. So let's start talking about what that journey looks like from your perspective of with the accountancy board. So I am going to share my PowerPoint. And it works properly. So, nope, and it's not showing my screen. All right, so let's see. We start here. All right, so okay, see my PowerPoint.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. All right, well then let's get started. All right, so the most basic part of the exam is when can I sit for the CPA exam and what are the requirements? And this has become a really, really important topic, especially considering the changes that the Oklahoma Accountancy Board worked with the society to make in November of 2023. Used to in Oklahoma, you had to have 150 college hours to sit for the CPA exam, but that changed. You now only need to have 120 hours, which with a bachelor's degree or its equivalent. So I like to stop here and mention that or its equivalent does not mean you can go to 6 different community colleges. I did have someone email us that like the day after this bill passed. It is meant for those that are in a dual like MAC program. So they're getting their accounting degree and their MBA or their accounting degree and their MAC program. Or if for some reason they it's held up for some administrative reason. So you owe the college tuition. If you went to a private college like me, you didn't go to all your chapels, things like that. At that point, we can just take a letter from the registrar stating that you have met all the requirements for a bachelor's degree. So that is a requirement to sit for the exam. Of that 120 hours, at least 24 must be upper level accounting hours, which means above principals. So the easiest measurement is going to be anything that's 3,000 or above. But there are a few caveats that I like to mention. The first is there are some 2,000 level courses that will count if their course content is above what you would have in a traditional principals course. If you think you might have one like that, I would suggest you reach out to Simone and have her look at the course for you so we can let you know. Also, I do like to warn that some principals courses for MBAs do not count toward the upper level, even though they start with a 5. So that's another thing is if you're in an MBA program and you're not sure if your foundational accounting or accounting for managers would count as upper level, definitely give us a call because those are 2 things that we do see. Then also of that accounting, at least one must be auditing. And so a lot of schools will offer internal auditing or they'll just call it external auditing or just auditing is usually what we see for the external side. You'll want to make sure you're taking the external auditing class. It has to be something that is focused toward the outside. And I just want to mention I am seeing people's chats and Simone is collecting those and we will most certainly be working on answering those at the end of the session. I just want to let you know that I am seeing them and not ignoring them. All right. Also, so the 9 hours of upper division level, this is going to be your economics, your finance, your IT. honestly, I don't say very much about this because I've been here for over 2 years and we have never denied an application to sit for the exam because of this requirement. Most colleges have their degree programs have no problem reaching this requirement. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is the residency requirement. This actually causes a lot of confusion among people who want to become candidates. We're actually in the process of removing this. There's a bill working its way through the legislature, but until such time that it is removed, you have to be a resident of Oklahoma upon your application. So that's the first thing I'm going to talk about is you only have to be present in Oklahoma when you apply and are approved to sit. If you apply and are approved to sit on Monday and then move to Arkansas on Tuesday, we don't care. You can still be an Oklahoma candidate at that moment once you've been approved, only that initial application moment. Another thing is there is no like length requirement. It does not matter if you don't have to like have a water bill. It can be anything that shows that you're like actually living here. So when I talk to college students, I like to mention like if you have a university mailbox, then that would count as proof of residency. Now, if you just have a normal PO box, that does not count. We have to be able to tie it back to a physical place, but we do count like university mailboxes. So let's say that you, start testing here, but then you move, but you still want to be an Oklahoma CPA, like licensure wise, there is no residency requirement for certification. All right. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is once you have those 4 components and you are ready to sit for the exam, you're going to deal with 3 different entities. You're going to have us, the Oklahoma Accountancy Board, NASBA, which is the Accountancy Board's like national association, and then you're going to have Prometric. The AICPA does feature, but they get their own slide because they deal with score releases. So we're going to start with these 3. So in regard to us, we're going to be the entity that tells you whether or not you meet the application, the requirements to sit and to become a CPA in Oklahoma. So you're going to submit your initial application to sit, or what we kind of in slang terms call a qual app. And you're also going to submit any ADA request. So now, one thing I like to talk about in regard to the ADA request is we provide a lot of accommodations. We don't want anyone to feel that they have something that would keep them from successfully testing. One of my favorite stories is I was a brand new executive director here in my first CPA ceremony, and there was a gentleman who was blind. And he came to the new CPA recognition ceremony, and he took the pledge, we presented his certificate. And how we accommodated him, or one of the ways, was we actually went down to the testing center and read him the questions. And he actually passed the exam and got the experience in everything. And so he's a CPA now. So don't ever feel like, there's no way you can accommodate my situation. We do, request that you let us know. In regard to timeline, we want you to submit that application to sit once all of the requirements are met. And then that ADA accommodation request, we do request that you submit it as soon as you know it's needed. For medical purposes, it does require a medical documentation from your doctor. So that is required. All right, so that's us. So next is NASBA, which stands for National Association of State Boards of Accountancy. So you're going to have a portal on the OAB website, and then you're going to have a NASBA portal. So I like to say that we are cheap. So to actually apply to sit for the exam, it's only $90, $75 for the application, and $15 for a background check that then we pay to another state agency. NASBA is the expensive one, as I like to say. So the current cost per section is $262.64, and you'll pay that directly to NASBA through the NASBA portal. At that point, you're going to get the notice to schedule, or what I call the golden ticket. So you need this to actually go into Prometric and take the exam. So when you're going to hear from NASBA is once you apply to sit and are approved, and you apply to say, okay, well, I want to take the financial accounting and regulation section, or that's not even FAR section. Then at that point, you'll go into NASBA, pay your testing fee, and you can download that notice to schedule. So also, And that brings us to Prometric. So now you have that notice to schedule, and you're going to go to Prometric, and you actually work with them to schedule the exam section. So we will discuss this later, but there's very specific things I want you to be aware of when you go to schedule, because your NTS has to be a certain way and your ID has to be a certain way, but we will talk about that when we talk about scheduling your test. I do like to mention that it can be kind of intimidating for people who have not gone to like that sort of testing environment before. They will like check your glasses. I mean, I think they looked inside my ears. I don't really understand that, but I'm pretty sure they looked inside and behind my ears when I went. So it can be intimidating, but other than that, it's just like a normal testing environment. And so those are the three entities that you will walk through. All right. So next, let's talk about score release. So the AICPA is the one responsible for scoring and setting the score release dates for the CPA exam. So there has been a bit of flux. So as we'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide, the CPA exam underwent a refresh, for lack of a better term, in January of 2024. When they did that, they had to change how often they were releasing the scores so that they could make sure that it was being scored properly. And so you were seeing long wait times between when you would sit for the exam and when you would actually get the score. The good news is that has gone away for 3 of the 4 sections that you have to sit for. So the core sections that we'll talk about during the next slide, that is going to basically be within 3 or 4 weeks after you sit for the exam. So if you sit for the exam January 31st, you're going to get your score by the end of February. The disciplines are a little different. So the disciplines are going to stay on a block schedule. And so you're going to have to wait 6 to 8 weeks after you sit for that section before you know if you passed or not. So I encourage you to take that into consideration when you're planning to sit, because they do not expect that to change. So they expected core to go back to continuous testing, which it did. That's what they call when you have that block schedule. But they do not expect disciplines to ever not have that lag time. So the good news is if you sign up for our monthly bulletin, we print the release dates in every monthly bulletin as they change, and you can also find them on the AICPA website. So I do like to mention that. All right, so let's talk about the exam. So before we get deeper into the exam, I'm going to talk a little bit about the application process. So I mentioned that you have an application to sit. Well, you have an application to sit to become a candidate. That basically tells NASBA, Prometric, everyone that you have met the legal requirements of Oklahoma to sit for the CPA exam. After you get that point, you are able to then apply to sit for a section. And that's a different application. So you've got the qual app and you've got the exam application. The exam application is where you say not today, but in the near future, I want to sit for FAR and regulation. That's going to be what your exam app is. An important thing to note is we're going to talk in the next slide about how long you have to finish the entire exam. But I do want to mention that notice to schedule that you get from NASBA only lasts 6 months. So if you decide that you want to take all 4 sections with one exam app and pay the fees all at once, that means you've given yourself 6 months to sit for all of those exams. You don't have to pass them, but you have to at least sit. If you don't sit for one of those sections, that means you've lost your money and you have to reapply. And so that's only, I would like to mention that because, those little details, when it's so expensive, you don't want to accidentally find yourself in that. All right, so let's talk about the core sections. So when they updated the exam in January of 2024, it went from all CPAs take the same 4 sections: regulation, financial accounting reporting, auditing and attestation, and business environment and concepts. They did away with that business environments and concepts and said, we want to refresh the CPA exam and create a core and discipline model. So now all CPAs take 3 core. So that's going to be your financial accounting and reporting, your regulation, your auditing and test, and then you get to pick. So I kind of joke that the core is kind of like your general education and the disciplines are like your major. And it's your major when you're like a freshman because you can change it as many times as you want. So that is basically the top that you're seeing on your screen, those top 3 yellow boxes are the ones that all CPAs have to take. And then you're going to pick one of the pink colored boxes at the bottom. And you are not stuck with the discipline you take first. So let's say you think you're a great tax person. And so I got this, I'm going to take tax compliance and planning, and then you bomb it and you get 20%. And you're like, IT's always been more my thing. So I'm going to go to switch information systems and controls. You can do that. You can change as many times as you want. And the good news is your CPA is not going to look any different to any employer. So someone who takes information systems and controls will have their CPA designation the same as someone who takes tax compliance and planning. The only way that your employer is going to know is if you tell them. I mean, I guess they could ask, and it's up to you whether or not you tell them, but you would have to tell them if they wanted to know. It comes down to the same CPA. Also, you can take any section as often as you want, or as many times as you want, and as often as you want, unless you're still waiting on a score release. We will not let you sign up to take the same section if you have not received your score from the last time you took that section. So you can't decide, like, pretty sure I bombed audit, so I'm going to take it again next week before your score's been released. We won't let you do that. You do have to wait till your score has been released. But there is no limit. I knew someone who took BEC 9 times. So you can take it as many times as it requires you to pass it. Also, one of the questions I saw come through for when we were registering is they were asking if you had to take them like all at once or you could take them one at a time. The good news is you can take them one at a time. I took mine one at a time over a period of 2 years. And so I say 2 years because I count from when I started studying to the time I passed my last exam. It wasn't quite 2 years by the time you actually look at when I started testing. So you can take them one at a time. If you want to take one in the morning and one in the afternoon, if you're just, that enthused, it's a lot. If you're that excited, you can do that. And let's say you pass the one in the morning but fail the one in the afternoon, you can go retake. Nothing is coupled, nothing has to be done together. All right. So let's talk a bit about the actual sections. So you have those 3 core that everyone has to take. So you've got your financial accounting and reporting, and that's going to cover your GAAP and your IFRS, your financial statements and transactions, your not-for-profit and governmental accounting, and things like that. And I will say, if you want a deeper understanding of what goes into each exam, they have blueprints, and you will see people say, oh, you can go look at the blueprints. I have read those blueprints. They're quite detailed, and honestly, they're probably not the best resource. I would highly suggest you either visit like the OSCPA or look at some of the CPE or CPA study provider breakdowns, things like that. It's probably gonna be a little bit more understandable for y'all to read. All right, and then you have regulations. So this is going to cover your U.S. ethics and professional responsibilities related to tax practice, U.S. business law, federal compliance for individuals and entities, and it's really going to focus on those recurring and routine transactions and preparation and review of tax returns. And so it's going to be your basics, for lack of a better term, except it's not basic. The CPA exam is very in-depth, but compared to what we're going to see in the disciplines is by being my basic. And then finally of the core, you have auditing and attestation. So, what I call the bread and butter that we see. So you're going to assess risk and appropriate response. You're going to look at audit procedures. You're going to look at conclusions and reports. Those are going to be kind of 3, big things that you're going to look at. All right, so let's say you're done with all those, and now you get to pick a discipline. In a way, this adds some fun, I feel like. I almost wish that I could have done this when I was sitting, because I've been like, ooh, which one do I want to pick? And so, but we're going to start, and you'll find that a lot of them have connections to the core sections. So the first one we're going to talk about is Business Analytics and Reporting, or BAR. It is most close to FAR, makes sense, FAR and FAR. It's going to have a data analytics focus, financial risk management, financial planning, your more advanced accounting topics. So that's one that you can choose. The next one is information systems and controls. This is probably the most unique. Pulled some from BEC. It did pull a little bit from auditing and attestation, but overall it's more unique. You're going to have your IT and data governance here, your information systems securities. This is going to be where you find your SOC 1 and SOC 2 engagements, questions about data collection, storage, and usage. All of that will be found information systems and controls. And then last but not least is tax compliance and planning. And as you can probably guess, it goes with regulation most commonly. It focuses on those non-routine and complicated tax transactions, as well as U.S. planning for individuals and entities and personal financial planning. It includes looking at tax alternatives and business structures. And so again, as a reminder, you have the top three everyone has to take. Everyone, regardless of their intention for what they want to do with their CPA, is they have to take FAR, regulation, and auditing. But then you get to pick from BAR, ISC, or TCP. And you're not, like I said, not stuck with it if you realize you're not as great as that subject as you thought you were. All right. So let's talk about time. All right. So this actually changed very recently. This changed September of 2024, September 15th to be exact. It was 18 months to complete the exam, and now it is 30. It became slightly more complicated because of the way that we changed the starting and ending of the clock. So one thing I want to say is I'm going to describe it here to you, but at the end we have a QR code where you can download a packet of PDFs, and one of the PDFs basically writes out what I'm about to tell you. So just kind of FYI, if you're like, oh my gosh, that was confusing and I did not understand it, we gotcha. You have to wait to the end, scan the QR code, it's all written out for you. All right. So one thing I do want to mention for our current candidates on the call is when the 30 months went into effect, we did make it retroactive. And so if you had any passing scores as of September 15th, 2024, your score could have been extended possibly. So you'll want to give us a call and see if that impacted your score. I'll mention that. All right, so let's talk, you kind of break down the time limit into 3 sections. So the first one is if you haven't set for any section. So let's say that you decide to become a candidate and today you got your approval email from Simone that congratulations, you're now officially a CPA candidate. How long do you have? So your first deadline you're running up against is staying an active candidate. So in Oklahoma, if you do not at least sit, you do not have to pass, but if you do not at least sit within the first 30 months upon receiving approval of your application to sit, then you become an inactive candidate. And at that point, you have to reapply to sit for the CPA exam. And so we do encourage you to at least sit for a section, at least one section in that first 30 months so you don't lose your active candidacy. So that's the kind of the first hurdle. So now let's say that you've taken a section, but you didn't pass. Okay, so what does that do to your timeline? So the day that you sit for the section and don't pass, that restarts your 30-month clock. At that point, you have 30 months to sit for another exam without becoming an inactive candidate. So that's probably the most simple one, honestly. All right, so this is the one that's the most important. And probably the one that could be the hardest to explain. So let's say you've passed one section and you think, all right, I got this. I'm going to go pass all 4. I got this. All right, you have 30 months from the day your score is released from your first pass section to sit for the remaining 3 parts. You'll notice that I said to sit because the clock starts on that 30 months when your score is released for your first passing section. But you do not need your score release for your last passing section to happen within that 30 months. You just have to have sat for that last section within the last 30 months. So let's say your 30 months ends on September 30th and you sit for your last section on September 15th, but you won't get your score until November 30th. Let's say on November 30th, you find out you passed. That's great. You have completed the requirements because you sat for your last passing section within that 30-month date from when you received your first passing score release. And so that's one thing that you have to remember is the clock starts on the score release date of your first passing section, but the end, for lack of a better term, is when you sit for your last passing section. And let's say that you don't make it, that start date restarts at the score release for your second passing section. So, and it rolls like that. And again, we have this all written down if you scan the QR code at the end, because it can get complicated. All right. And then as with, if you've not passed any sections, let's say you pass one, but you wait 31 months to sit for another section, your candidacy would expire at that point as well. Passing a section does not, indeterminately extend your candidacy. You do have to also sit within that 30 months. All right. So we've talked about the requirements and the timeline and all that stuff. Let's talk about the actual application. So what we found is a lot of times this is the first time that people have really had to interact with a government agency, and we try to make it as simple as possible, but sometimes it's not as simple. Like, we can only make it so simple, so we're trying to help. So this is a mnemonic, I think is how you say it, that we came up with, CPA to be, and it's supposed to help you complete your application. So the first thing you're going to need for the C is college transcripts. You must send those to us. They must be originals. We can take them electronically, like through eScripts, or you can mail them to us. It has to be sealed by the college. There's a reason for this. One of the best examples is a gentleman who lost his license because he falsified his OU transcripts and said he graduated with a degree, and he did not. We found out 30 years later he was going through a nasty divorce with his ex-wife, and his ex-wife was his girlfriend at the time, and she proceeded him into the board, and he did lose his license. But that's one of the reasons that we do require originals. So that is something. Now, also, if you went to several colleges, you can just send the one where you got your bachelor's and or master's degrees, as long as it shows a breakdown of all the accounting and business courses that are required to sit for the exam. That's where a lot of times it'll show, like, a college, 50 hours from Seminole State College. If you're planning on needing some of those to meet the business or the accounting hour requirements, we would need those transcripts so we could see the breakdown. Also, if you're a former candidate who's rejoining, which if you are, welcome, you probably do not need to resend your transcripts as long as you were approved the first time. So just give us a call and make sure that we still have them on file. It'll save you an extra step. All right, the next one is P, passport photo, except it does not have to be a passport photo. It can be a selfie. This is just to make sure that you don't turn around and pay someone else to pass the exam for you. I'm sure you guys have seen some movies. There's been movies about this. So just, make sure you can take a selfie, send it to us. We do ask that you don't send it in an HEIC format, because we've been seeing an uptick in that, and we can't open those on our computers for some reason. So we do ask for that. All right, also an affidavit of lawful presence notarized. We do take electronic notaries. So if someone is unsure where they can get a document notarized, if you Google electronic notaries, this is something relatively new. I had never heard about this until I saw one come across my desk about 6 months ago. We will take them, and you do it online. Makes it a little easier. We need it to show that you are in the U.S. legally, not illegally, legally. I do like to mention that it doesn't mean that you have to have a green card or be a naturalized U.S. citizen or like born here. It can be if you're here like on a student visa, anything that shows you're here legally. If there's been some gum up in some of the works in regard to working with U.S. immigration, you can call us and we can talk about the situation with you to let you know if we think that we can get all the documentation we need. So we're always open to calls. If you're like, well, I have a unique situation, been around for a while, we can probably help you through your unique situation. So we always say, give us a call. All right, the next are the 2 fees that I mentioned. So 2 fees to pay, that's going to be your application and your background check. We cannot formally process you and say, yes, they're a CPA candidate until we have these fees paid, unfortunately. So we do need that to happen. And then finally is B. So be prepared to wait 5 to 7 days for approval. So this is assuming everything was properly given, but we're doing pretty good. So we keep track of this as a performance metric, and our average time for from our application to sit all the way to approved to sit was 6.44 days in February. So you can largely expect this response, assuming you get your transcripts and stuff to us. All right, this is where I wanted to talk about and some of those things that trip people up. I like to mention it because even let's say you're a sophomore, like, I'm not taking this for another 2 years. Honestly, I hope you remember this, and maybe no one tells you between then and or now and then. Maybe it'll kind of help you not have so many problems. So one is schedule early. Sometimes the only tests available are several weeks out. This is especially a problem for the disciplines because they're block scheduled. So you can only take them in from January 1st to January 31st. And then I think the next one is March 1st to March 31st. And then you've got June, July, and then September and November. And then after that, you have to wait until the next cycle. And if your NTS is running out because the 6-month clock's running down and you waited until you only had 2 weeks left on your NTS and the next setting is 2 months from now, it can be a problem. We really saw this happen when they were doing the exam change in November of 2023, November and December. People were waiting and then they couldn't get spots. So make sure and schedule early. One thing I like to mention is, and I did this when I was a CPA candidate, if you schedule it and you're like, oh darn, I'm not ready, you can always pay a fee and reschedule it. I did that many times with regulation. I think I did it 3 times with regulation. So it's always at least you have a spot. And so I'd like to mention that. All right, so let's talk about testing locations. Even though you must be located in Oklahoma when you are going to apply to sit for the exam, you don't have to test in Oklahoma. You can test anywhere in the world as an Oklahoma candidate as long as you had Oklahoma residency when you applied to sit. So, I mean, so I just listed like some examples, but like Japan, Guam, the Philippines, I mean, they have, I think, Puerto Rico, I mean, all over the world, some places in the Middle East. You can test anywhere as an Oklahoma candidate, as long as you lived here when you applied. All right, so let's talk about some common mistakes that I want to mention. So one is failing to bring that correct notice to schedule, that NTS. That's why I call it this golden ticket, because if you have a NTS and you printed off one for FAR and one for auditing, and you got your dates mixed up and you took your auditing one when you're supposed to take FAR, they won't let you in. And you've lost the fees. You have to reapply to take the exam or the exam app. You do not have to reapply to become a candidate. You will remain a candidate. I'm talking about just the exam app. You want to make sure you have the right one. You also want to make sure your ID matches. So we see this a lot with individuals who get married or divorced during their journey to becoming a CPA. Their ID will get updated, but their notice to schedule will not. They will not let you in. The only caveat is if they're like one has your middle initial and one has your full middle name, they'll let you in. But other than that, they will not let you in. And then last but not least, timing out on the launch screen. This is very important. People get the jitters. They forget to put in their launch code. It times out after 5 minutes. And then you have to, you're locked out. You cannot take the exam that day. You have to reapply to take that section of the exam, and you're out of luck. So what I tell people is enter the launch code and freak out on the first question. Don't freak out on the launch screen. Save yourself a lot of trouble. All right, so let's say you made it through all that. You've applied, you've passed the exam, all of that's good. What about getting certified? All right, in Oklahoma, it takes about 30 months from application to sit to application for certification. That's just an average based on data since November 2023. We have some people that complete it as fast as 6 months, and then we have people that it took them 5 or 6 years. It very much varies. We still do require 150 hours of college credit, including a bachelor's degree, to be licensed. It does not have to be a master's. And if you have a bachelor's degree that either requires 150 hours, or you already changed your major a couple times, or you did like me, I got 2 bachelors, You do not have to go and get an additional 30 hours in addition to that bachelor's if you already meet that 150-hour requirement, as well as the accounting and business requirements. So the 30 hours of accounting above principles, that is the same as with applying to SID, except you need 30 hours versus 24. So this is 6 more hours. This is not 30 on top of the 24. This is 30 total. And then again, you must pass all 4 parts of the CPA exam. I did want to mention at this time, we had a couple extensions in the past. We are not currently planning on any future extensions of current standing scores. So I did want to mention that for our current candidates on the call. All right, the ethics exam. So it is harder than you think, and you need a 90. I remember the first time I took it, I thought this would be easy. I know not to steal money. I'm an ethical person. I took it at 9:30 at night, tried to do it fast. I didn't pass. But the good news is it is open book, and you can take it as many times as you want. You don't have to go anywhere special. It's not proctored. We've never had anyone who couldn't pass it. It just might have to take a few times. It covers independence and other rules, not just, like I said, don't steal money. All right, and then the experience requirement, you'll need 1,800 hours of experience. And now I'm going to slip to the next slide because I know we got a lot of questions about this. And I'm almost done, guys, and y'all will switch to Q&A. All right, so what counts as experience? So we have a very broad definition of accounting work. This can be everything from I was a bookkeeper to I was doing taxes to I was doing audits. I was doing financial planning. For example, I got my experience in government, and I was doing budgeting and financial planning for state agencies. And so that qualified. There is no requirement that it be happened before you sit, while you sit, or after. So I earned mine both before and during while I was sitting. But I know some people do it after. There is no requirement. The only requirement is the experience must be earned within 4 years before you apply for licensure. So let's say you apply for licensure in 2025. Any experience that happened before 2021 could not be counted. So let's say that you acted as a bookkeeper in 2015, but you applied for licensure now, you could not count that experience. All right, it can also be under a CPA or non-CPA. If it's under a non-CPA, the supervisor will just have to write a letter detailing the requirements. And then we have a special committee, but I've seen one denied the entire time I was here, and it was because it was a family member, so there was concerns about a conflict of interest. So a lot of states will require a CPA to sign off on your experience. In Oklahoma, we do not require that. They just need to be your supervisor. We do, so if someone here is self-employed, we do have a system set up in limited circumstances to verify your experience. You just want to call the board to discuss that if you're in that situation. All right, it can be paid or unpaid. It can be an internship. It can be full-time, part-time. Now, if it's an internship, you cannot count it for academic credit hours toward that 150 and count it toward the work experience. We don't allow double dipping. But it can be in government, industry, academia, public accounting. I mean, we've had professors who have used their experience. Like I said, I was in government. Lots of people, they might work at Love's as an accountant. All of that counts. It can also be through multiple employers. We recently had someone who did like 5 or 6 different internships over a long span, and it doesn't matter. As long as you get people to sign up, we will take as many experience forms as you need. It can be with as many employers as you want, as long as we have someone who's willing to sign off. All right, so that is the dump on experience. All right, so let's talk about those who may want to start here, but they're not going to finish. So, so if you start testing in Oklahoma and want to become a candidate in a different state, that's not a problem. The scores will transfer as long as you meet the requirements to become a candidate in the state that you're going to. So you'll need to call the state you're going to and basically make sure everything is good and then find out what form they want. So it has an interstate exchange form that we can fill out to basically help transfer your scores from our state to another state. We're also happy some states want their form, and we're happy to fill that out for them and send it to the state. There is no fee associated with that. That is free. All right, so reciprocity is when you're already licensed in Oklahoma. So let's say you go all the way through and you get licensed in Oklahoma and then you get a great job offer in Texas. The good news is that your scores will be accepted. Now, in regard to your college credit hours and whether you meet their requirements for licensure, that is going to depend on the state. So you will need to call you're moving to and ask them basically, you know, what process do I need to do to make sure I meet all your requirements. For this process, you'll probably need your scores transferred and also a letter of good standing. Basically, it's a letter we produce that says, yeah, they're an Oklahoma CPA, they're not suspended on probation, etc. That's also free. We do not charge for that. And so that's all right. Congratulations, y'all made it to the end of the PowerPoint. I do want to mention that Simone is going to be the main point of contact for any questions about the exam because she knows way more than me. And so you don't want to call me. Also, so we have a lot of online resources. We have a pathway to CPA infographic. You can actually access that in the QR code you're seeing. We'll download a packet of candidate resources. One thing we love about the pathway to CPA infographic is we saw a lot of people who wanted something that showed them the entire cycle. And so we did that. And if you click on the individual boxes, it will bring up instructions on how to complete that specific step. And so we certainly encourage you to download that. We also have an eligibility checklist. Helpful guides and FAQs are on our website. You can sign up for our candidate list. So if there's any major candidate updates, we'll send that out. Also, our monthly bulletins, you could sign up for those on our website. And that's going to be where you find any changes in regard to requirements to sit, how long you have, extensions, etc. That's going to be in our monthly bulletin. And then finally, social media. So we are active on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and we post regularly. And we have that largely focused toward candidates. So we encourage you to look at that. And like I said, that candidate packet will get you that 30-month breakdown I was talking about, the pathway to CPA infographic, and a comparison of the exam and certification requirements, things like that, just to help you. And they're also available on our website. All right, so now that we have got there, we're going to move to questions. So don't enough to keep track of those for us. So I am going to pull it up. Sorry, I got to move my thing out of the way for a moment so I can pull it up. And then we will get to work on that. All right. All right, I'm just going to take these in order. And I will say that if we are going to answer these and put them on the website for anyone who had to drop off earlier. It'll probably take us a week or two, but we will be posting these answers on the website as well. All right, does the Accountancy Board post to social media legislative rule updates pertinent to the uniform exam, or is there somewhere else to easily find updates? So if there are legislative and rule updates that we are implementing, yes, we will post about them in the bulletin and on social media. You'll get the most immediate news, honestly, on social media. And then but you can also find it in the bulletin. If there's something in regard to how the exam itself is changing, I would recommend either the society or the AICPA, because they're probably going to talk more about content changes than we do. All right, okay, do you count foreign university credits? So yes, if you are a foreign candidate, we have a process that you can basically send your transcripts to NASBA and they will evaluate your transcripts and compare it to basically our requirements. What I would suggest is if you are looking at that situation, you give Simone a call and she can walk you through a more detailed step-by-step of that process. But we do, yes. All right, for someone who has already completed 150 credit hours through a bachelor's in accounting and a master's in business, is there a specific work requirement under a CPA supervision before applying to take the CPA exam? So the answer is no, there is no experience requirement to sit for the CPA exam. And even after you finish the CPA exam or while you're taking the CPA exam, as long as you meet that broad definition of accounting work, there is no special requirement based on the degree you got or anything like that. And yes, I will email out a copy of the slides after the presentation. That was question number 4, will you send out a copy of the slides? All right. Okay, what is the test format? Are there essay questions, multiple choice? All right, so I can tell you the basics, and Blaine, feel free to jump in here if you want. So yes, so there are multiple choice questions and task-based. The number of each type depends on the test that you're taking. There is a good breakdown, ironically, on the Texas Board of Accountancy website that I'm going to steal. But you can find that online. If you just Google that, you should be able to find. But it's multiple choice and task-based. And Blaine, do you know if they got rid of all writing? There used to be a portion. Do you know if they still require the writing portion?
I'm not 100% certain on that.
Okay.
But we do with Emerson Collins and through our website, we do have the kind of the CPA exam blueprints that have guides on those format of questions and sample questions and that information. So we have that available as well.
Oh, great. All right. All right, so question number 6 is, now I am taking accounting classes for a bachelor's degree, and I have 2 more semesters to finish for the degree. So what can I do for the CPA exam? Before I go to the exam, how long should I study for the exam? For the exam, is there the same subjects that Ashley mentioned recently? So yes, my guess is even if by the time you finish your college career, the sections I don't expect will have changed. They should still be the same 3 core and the same 3 discipline. In regard to how long you study, I think that depends on basically your personality, what you have going on in your life. I was a little bit longer. I was working full time. I was living on my own. So I think it took me a little bit longer. I think it just depends on life circumstances. And in regard to what you can do to prepare, I think some of those resources that Blaine mentioned are great. Those mock CPA exams, go ahead and applying for scholarships if possible, anything that you can do to kind of connect with your peers would always be a good thing. And Blaine, you got anything to answer in regards to like the study or what they can do now?
Yeah, I mean, I think getting involved, with the accounting clubs on campus, like Beta Alpha Psi, like I said, the events, the mix and mingles, the various events that Emerson and her team do with respect to our student and associate memberships at the OSCPA, hopefully provide a lot of guidance with that. And then, looking into, a lot of the exam prep courses do provide some free resources before you start the prep that really gives you some insight to what that process is going to be like. So, the more you know, the sooner you can kind of devise that schedule.
Thank you. All right. Oh, I like this question because it is a huge source of pride for CPAs. If you are a licensed CPA in Oklahoma, can you practice in different states, or do you have to sit for the CPA exam in other states? The answer is no. So if you are an Oklahoma CPA, then you have what is called mobility, which means you can practice remotely into other states without being licensed in all jurisdictions except Hawaii. Hawaii still doesn't want you working for their people remotely, and you do not have to pay a fee. You do not have to be licensed. The only time you have to be licensed normally in other states is if you're going to go live there. There is some changes on the horizon with the interest in 120 plus 2, but right now in Oklahoma, if you're an Oklahoma CPA, you have full practice privilege in, like I said, all the states except Hawaii. Hawaii's like, nah, I'll have to get licensed. It's a big source of pride. We're one of the few, if the only profession that has that. All right. So is 120 hours or 150 hours to be able to be certified? It is 150 hours to be certified. You only have to have 120 hours to sit for the exam, but you must have 150 hours when you apply for certification. And so in Oklahoma, that is the current requirement. All right, does work experience have to be completed within a specific number of years after passing the CPA exam? Okay, and for whoever wrote this question, I'm going to take out a little bit of the context, but hopefully still answer your question. All right, so the only requirement, so what you're really asking is how long do I have after I pass the CPA exam to apply for certification? The answer is technically forever. There is a requirement that if it is longer than 5 years, you must complete 120 hours of continuing education. And so if you wait longer than 5 years, there's an extra step, but technically your passing scores never expire. All right. All right. And if you have, for the person who wrote this question, if you have more specific questions, feel free to give Simone a call and she can help you with that. Also, if you sit for the CPA exam in Oklahoma and complete the testing requirements but move to another state to work, will working in that other state count toward the hours of becoming licensed as a CPA? Okay, so this is a great question. The answer is it will count. We don't care where you work. You can work in Europe, you can work in Africa, you can work in Antarctica. We don't care, as long as you have someone who will sign off as your supervisor, then we will take those work hours. There's no requirement that you be in Oklahoma. All right, so can experience in internal auditing, even though it's not in my job title, count? Yes. So basically, when you apply, it's not just your job title we look at, we also look at your duties. And then if there's questions, we'll call you for clarification, especially what I found is the people who work in like oil and gas pricing. I've had to call them and be like, all right, so tell me more about what you do. So yes, so even if your job title doesn't sound accountanese, we do look at the job duties and take that into consideration. All right. If my foreign school is closed and transcripts are sent to the archives, how can I provide a bachelor's degree transcript? Would MBA transcripts suffice instead? Okay, so what I would suggest for the individual who asked this question, that you give us a call. So NASBA is used to working with situations like this, so they might be able to help you work through that. And there are some nuances in regard to accepting your MBA that could call, because it's like what college hours does your MBA show? Is it enough to meet the requirements? Things like that. So for the individual who asked that question, I would suggest that you actually call Simone and tell her the specifics of your circumstance, and we'll work with you. We probably can make it work. It's very rare we can't make it work. All right. Can we internship hours after receiving credit for one semester? So if I'm an intern for 4 years and only one of those years were utilized for college credit, can I count the additional 3 for the hours? Yes, as long as you're not double dipping, you can count the internship hours toward experience. Does experience as an AP/AR specialist count? It likely will. That's when we go into looking at the job duties, but you probably would be okay, considering we would consider AP and AR accounting related. All right. Does Oklahoma issue CPA certifications after passing all parts or only after meeting work requirements? In Oklahoma, you must meet that in all of those parts of the certification graph that I showed. You must meet all of those to be certified. I know that in at least one state, once you pass the exam, even if you don't have the work experience, they'll give you like something to put on your wall. In Oklahoma, it's not like that. You must have the work experience, have the basically exam, work experience, ethics exam, education, and all of that before you could actually be called a CPA in Oklahoma. All right, number 11, can work experience be obtained after passing the CPA exam? So yes, it can. And then the second part is, if I said within 4 years of applying, does this mean I can't apply until work experience is met? That would be correct. We cannot complete processing your CPA your application for certification until you have met all the requirements. And so once you meet that work requirement, you'll want to apply then. And then number 12. This person is asking if they could be supplied with the recording, and the answer is, assuming the technology properly, yes. We will be posting a recording on our website. Like I said, assuming the technology is working appropriately. So, all right, Simone, any last questions? Nope.
No.
All right. Well, then, thank you all so much. We really appreciate the time. Sorry, we ran a little bit over. We really appreciate the time. We hope you learned a lot. Please call us, call Blaine with any questions you have. We're so excited that you're interested in the CPA journey. It's a great profession, honestly. So, all right. Thank you very much and have a great day.